Now that the rear end is finished up, it's time to move on to the engine. It ran okay, but I'll be doing a full teardown, inspection, and refresh to make sure it's ready for the track. First thing I have to do is take off this whole core support thing here. It's really not that bad, it's only got maybe 5 bolts on each side. I already have the radiator out and the intake as well. So there might be a couple things here or there to detach, but that's about it. Oh, would you look at that? I removed the serpentine belt to remove all the accessories off the engine to make it easier to pull out. Then I took off the power steering pump, which has a hidden bolt in the back. Next, I removed the power steering fluid reservoir, which completely separated the system from the engine. Notice I didn't have to drain any power steering fluid to do this. I'm going to take this intake manifold off so I can get to the hook at the back in order to hoist the engine out. I've done this once before, so it shouldn't be too bad. Should be easier with no PCV system. Cool, it's out. Alright, well I already cleaned this up last year in hopes that I'd be running the car, and then I didn't, so this has already come apart, and I'm doing it again, which is fine. So I think the bolt I want to get to, or the hole rather, is right back here. Can't really see that, but there's a hole there I can use to put a bolt through for the hoist. With a mess of tubes in the front done with, I had to disconnect the drive shaft from the transmission. This involved undoing the transmission brace and removing the bolts on the flex joint. So I dropped the center support a little bit, right where the U-joint is, and that allowed me to slide out the drive shaft from that coupling right there on the engine. So now I'm going to have to try and tackle this shift linkage, and then that slave cylinder for the clutch is going to have to be disconnected as well. Shifter is now off. This rod that actually does the shifting has a little clip on the end of it here, which is kind of self-explanatory. You can just pop that off. This one up here has some form of pin going through it, which looks a little something like this. And it kind of goes in like that. And then if you just mess with this tab, you can just barely see it on top. You can rotate it and then work its way out, and then it should just pop off. So it's kind of tricky, but I got that. I had already cut out the exhaust to get my rear subframe out, so at this point, the only thing holding the engine in were the engine mounts. My ceiling isn't high enough to move the hood back to clear the engine crane, so I remove the hood. I bought this load leveler, thinking it would work, but these chains are too short to go this far, and I can't lengthen them or join them. So I bought these chains, but the links aren't wide enough to fit the load leveler, so I'm just going to use this, which I should be able to figure out. Should be able to balance it properly. And worst comes to worst, I can always drop the engine down and lift it back up to get it to the right angle to get on the stand. So I'm just going to see how this one goes. With the engine mounts undone, the engine should be able to pull right out. It was hard getting the engine to the right angle. The valve cover was hitting the firewall, and the oil pan wasn't clearing the subframe. Okay, so now I am dropping the front subframe so it'll clear the oil pan, which involves getting a jack beneath here, undoing all the bolts for the control arms, and undoing all the bolts, which involves undoing all the bolts for the subframe and the control arm bushings. So now I'm going to try and support the weight of the engine, as much as possible anyways. Alright, it's going to take some more coercing than that. Still being held in somehow. The passenger engine mount was sticking to the subframe even though the nut was removed. You can see how much the whole car is moving even though all the mounts are undone. So that engine mount, even though the nut's off, is still connected to the engine. The engine doesn't want to let go of the subframe, even though both are loose. There we go. I think I got it. I just had to lower it down enough. So I guess it was twisting the threads or something. All right, that is out. The final step was removing the transmission and getting the engine on the stand. That. There was one final small bolt holding on a shield that has to come off before the transmission will come out. There it is. Well, that it's not a stock clutch. Oh my goodness. Oh, I guess I just fell out. Huh. Isn't that peculiar? I'm going to pop off this cover before putting it on the stand, because I've noticed that most people who put it on stands, at least that I've seen on YouTube, forget to do this, and then they have to take it off the stand to get this cover off. With the rear main seal cover removed, I bolted on the stand plate and brought it up to the right height. I had to buy a couple bolts since the bell housing ones were too short. It was tricky extending the crane so the stand would fit between its legs, but I managed to get it in. And there it is! The engine is out of the car and on the stand. In the next part, we'll do a full teardown, then inspect the internals to see what it needs. As always, thanks for watching and feel free to like and subscribe.